Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to day one of the holiday card series for 2020. 2020 has been both 10 years long and 10 minutes long. It has come and gone real fast, and it has also been as slow as molasses. I'm sure you all can relate. Anyway, we're here. We're here at day one of the holiday card series. For those of you who are brand new to this, it is a series of 25 card videos that I share with all of you on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I believe this series this year goes all the way up until the 21st of December. So right before Christmas, I will be, I'll stop sharing all these cards with you. But until then, we've got 25 days of different card ideas and inspiration that are all holiday themed. And it's one of my most favorite times of year. And I hear from all of you, or many of you, that it is the beginning of the holiday season for you is my day one of my series. So here we are. Here's your holiday season beginning. Today's card features a stamp set from Mama Elephant, which I love. It was one of my most favorites of their stamp sets that was released a little bit ago, and I've been just waiting to use it until today. Day one of the holiday card series is always special to me, so I hope you guys enjoy. Let's get into it. For day one of the holiday card series, I'm using the Let It Snow stamp set from Mama Elephant. This came out a couple months ago, or maybe just a month ago, and I've wanted to use it ever since. Now I'm going to be stamping a scene, and I know that my card will eventually be a 5x7 card, and I want it to have a really thick white border on it. So I know I'll probably be trimming down this scene with these A7 layer dice from Waffle Flower. So I'm going to go ahead and make some scratch paper that's exact size of the die that I'll be using. That just makes it so as I do my kind of practice stamping, that I create the scene within the amount of space that I have. I don't want to somehow stamp things out of the frame or have to adjust things along the way. And I also wanted to do a practice stamping. I wanted to kind of see where these images would look best with each other. So I just did a really rough kind of stamp sketch, a little stamp map of where all these images would go. So after I had that kind of stamped, I broke out my watercolor paper. This is Fabriano Artistico Extra White. And this is going to be what I paint on. It's 5x7, so it's the actual size of my card. So I'm just going to place that paper kind of in the center so that I can get an idea of where it will be on my card. And I'm going to tape it in place so that I can kind of lift it up and stamp a little bit. I've showed this in a live video recently, and this is great if you have a lot of precision stamping you're going to do. You can kind of create a little booklet where this kind of folds up and out of the way when you're ready to stamp. Just want to make sure you put some pencil lines so you know exactly where the edges of that stamp map originated. So I'm going to lift this up out of the way, and now I can stamp. So I'm stamping in antique linen distress ink because I'm going to be doing some no-line watercoloring. And for the most part, this distress ink is really hidden once you start painting it. And that's one of the reasons why I decided not to mask the area of the scarf. I just decided to just stamp right over the tree. Now, that will come up later in the video, and I'll explain exactly how I got rid of those lines. I also stamped the snowman a little bit lower since I realized from my practice stamping that I wanted the scene just a little bit lower on my watercolor paper. I erased those pencil lines that I used to position my stamp map, and then I taped my watercolor piece down to a hardboard since I will be painting the entire area. Using my Magello Mission Gold paints today, and I'm going to have my paint palette on the side of the screen while I paint. I'm not doing a ton of color mixing today, but I've done this in the past with a smaller paint set, and I know you guys enjoyed seeing the actual palette as I was painting so you could see what I was doing. So I thought I would go ahead and try that with today's video. Now this tree, this birch tree off to the side, I just mixed up a nice gray shade and brought it in at its strongest along the side, which will be the shaded side of the tree. And after I had that on, I came in with a damp brush and just softened those edges. I'm now moving on to the scarf, and I'm using a nice bright red shade, and I will just start painting the far end of the scarf. By the way, I'm using a size 4 silver brush black velvet. Yeah, I had to think about that for a minute. I haven't used these brushes in a while, but I don't understand why I stopped because they're so fantastic. So I started with just a nice red shade, and I'm going to paint areas that aren't touching each other so that I can move along and just let this air dry as I paint the entire scarf. I'm mixing up a nice green shade for the hat, and I do the strongest color where it will be shaded, and then bring in a clean, damp brush to spread out that color. I'm going to use that same green later on the small hat of the snowman. Adding some orange for their noses, carrots obviously, then bringing in that same green for the hat. Going back to that red shade, and I'm going to give this snowman the same red scarf. It's almost like the bigger snowman is building the small snowman, or maybe they're friends, I don't know. But he's making the other snowman look similar to him. So the red that I initially painted was dry, so now I'm coming in and painting the other areas. And my idea is that the light is mostly coming from the right side, so the darkest shades will be on the left. And when it comes to shading snowmen, they're white, so it might be a little weird to add color on them. But I will be adding quite a bit of color on these snowmen because even if they are white, they're still going to have a shadow. Using a light gray for the brim on his hat and also the little puffy ball on the top. So now I'm mixing up a little bit more of that grayish blue shade, and I'm going to add the foreground. This is the ground that the snowmen are on, and I just want that extending all the way across with a little bit more color and shading right underneath the snowmen. So I'm just going to spread that out. All right, so at this point, I was starting to think about how I would do the background. So I mixed up a really intense blue-black shade, and I thought I would do it upside down, but then I turned it back around, and I just started painting this, coming down, adding full strength color at the top, but then swishing my brush in my bucket of water and just bringing in water so that as it comes down, it lessens in color just a little bit. Painting very carefully down there at the bottom, giving it a nice line. I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to do this, but I was thinking that I wanted to add a line of trees to kind of make the scene a little bit more complete. But I'm not going to do that until I have my background completely dry so that I can paint my trees on top. Adding a little more color, trying to get the two sides to match up in color. And then I dried that. Now I'm mixing up that really dark blue again, and I'm coming in with a size 2 brush. I think I've gone to a size 2 at this point. And the way I do these trees is very similar to how I did that card last year. And I'll link that up in the top corner if you want to check that out. But basically a vertical line for the trunk, and then just start making dabs, like little blobs of color, and they start to look like trees. It's super easy to paint trees like this. It's very messy. It reminds me of Bob Ross. So I'm painting on these trees, giving it a little bit of a forest line. And then I'm going to take that dark blue color and I'm going to do it right along the bottom of the trees and have it fade down toward the snowmen. So it's just going to make it a little bit more dramatic. And the main reason why I did this was because I wanted to have a darker color against the edge of the snowman so that it would help define the shape of the snowman. And so I thought it would just look better to have this dark color. And then in the end, it kind of looked a little bit more correct that these trees were far in the background and didn't have much light on them. And it really lets the foreground scene of the snowman and the tree kind of take center stage. I think that it worked out really well. So I'm bringing that dark blue color up near that horizon line and then cleaning off my brush and extending the color down so that it fades more near the bottom. Painting in all those little tiny areas, trying to get that color to fade. And I'll add it to this far side as well, trying to carefully go around the scarves. Now you'll notice the two lines of the tall tree are going right through the scarf. And I thought, you know what? Okay, I'm going to add shading to this scarf. I'm going to take some of that red color I was using before and mix that with a super dark brown. And this is going to give me the perfect shading color. Adding more and more of this dark brown, trying to get a deep cranberry color. And then I'm going to add the shading in on the scarf. Now you'll notice as I start painting this in, it is not enough to hide those two lines from the tree. I mean, it does a little bit, but you can definitely still see them. So at this point, I was thinking, oh dear, what am I going to do to help hide those lines? I probably should have masked the snowman and then stamped the tree, but I didn't. And I'm committed to this card now. I am in it to win it. I've got to keep going. So I thought, you know what, I'll come back later and I will add some stripes to the scarf. And maybe that'll be enough to hide my little accidental stamping lines. So I continued shading, adding more of this red shade. And then I was going to start shading other areas as well. And right now, everything's looking pretty anemic except for the scarf. So I added some shading to the green areas. And then I'm going to start shading the actual snowman because I added a little bit of shading before, but I need to add some more shading and it needs to be pretty dramatic because this scene sort of looks like a nighttime sky, not really. I'll eventually be adding some snow, so it could just be kind of like a dark, snowy afternoon. That's kind of the vibe I'm going for. While the face was wet, I dropped in a little bit of a pink shade just for some blush on the cheeks. And then I wet the other snowman's face so that I could add the pink cheeks as well. Adding that darker blue shading along the snowman. Once again, the light's coming from the right, so the shading will be on the left. Did the same thing for the other snowman. He's so cute, such a little guy. Adding more shading and then kind of just softening the shaded line with a damp brush. All right, so now I'm thinking about finishing off this black hat and then also how I'm going to add the stripes to the scarf to hide those lines. So first I'm going to finish up the hat and make sure that it's nice and dark and shaded. It sort of looks like maybe the bigger snowman is handing the hat to the small snowman, or maybe he's building that snowman. I'm not entirely sure, but I kind of like the story. So I've gone back to that dark brown shade or the reddish brown, and I'm going to start adding in these little tiny lines, and I'm trying to go directly over where those lines are of the tree. And I was surprised how well this hid those lines. So it's kind of an accident that I needed to fix to have those lines there, but I love how these lines look on the finished scarf. It's actually one of my most favorite parts of this card is the detail on the scarf. There isn't a ton of detail in any area except for on the scarves. And I really, really love how these turned out, just adding a little bit of that darker red to add detail onto the scarves. I'm going to grab a very thin black pen and add on the faces of the snowman and also the arms. And I pulled out that stamp set and referred back to it to make sure I had all the pieces in the right spots, because as I started painting over the top, it really softened those edges. So I'm going to just do a little bit more shading right underneath the snowman because I realized everything else is pretty shadowed and looks pretty good, but I don't really have a shadow underneath the snowman. And with the light coming from the right, there would be quite a bit of shade coming from that direction. So I'm going to soften out that shadow line And then here we are. I've pretty much done with the initial painting. I'm going to come back in a little bit and add snow, but I first need to trim this down to the exact size that I want so I have the correct placement for my greeting. So I'm using that die that I put aside earlier. Once again, this is one of the A7 Layers dies from Waffle Flower. And I'm holding that in place with a little bit of washi tape, and then I ran that through my die cutting machine. And then I'm left with perfectly cut out scene. I'm going to put that in my Misty stamp positioning tool, and I'm going to stamp the large Let It Snow greeting from the stamp set in Versamark ink and then heat emboss it. So I've prepped the area with an anti-static pattern tool and then inking up my stamp with Versamark. I'll press that down really gently. I actually stamped it twice to get a really good impression, and then sprinkled on some alabaster embossing powder from Brutus Monroe, which is a nice bright white. I'll hit that with my heat tool until it's smooth and melted. And then it's time for some snow. And I thought about splattering on some white gouache, but in the end, I decided that I wanted a little bit more control over where the snow appeared. I didn't want it to cover up too much of the snowman's face, and I didn't want it to encroach on the greeting too much. So I decided to be a control freak and very carefully add all these individual snowflakes. And I made sure to add the snowflakes on top of the scarf and each hat of the snowman and in front of each snowman, because I wanted to make sure it looked like the snowflakes were covering this entire scene. So I hit that with my heat tool to speed up the drying, and then I put foam adhesive on the back of my watercolor piece and put it directly onto a 5x7 card base made out of Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 110-pound cardstock. And that is the finished card for today. Love how that turned out. I hope you guys enjoyed that card for today. I love it. And like I probably said in the voiceover, because I haven't done the voiceover yet as of filming this little talking right here, my most favorite part is the scarf. I love that it was the lines on the scarf that instigated me, like the lines from the stamping that instigated me actually adding texture to the scarf, because the texture is one of my most favorite parts of it, which is really interesting. So I hope you guys enjoyed this card. I will be back on Wednesday for day 2 of the holiday card series. And just a little note for future videos. Every time one of my holiday card series cards happens to be on a Friday, it will be a live video at noon Mountain Time. So you'll want to tune in for that. So you'll have 2 regular videos and then a live. And I hope you guys enjoy it's a little different this year, but I love connecting with all of you guys during my live streams here on YouTube. So I can't wait for that to start. Thanks so much for watching today. Like I said before, I'll be back on Wednesday with day 2 of the holiday card series.